Hi, my name is Fatma. I will present about unit testing on Next.js for better and highly reliable applications. A little bit more about me. I am a software engineer at Altera. I used to study petroleum engineering for my master and also undergraduate study. I graduated from a coding bootcamp called Altera Academy, where I learned everything from scratch to become a full stack engineer. I have been working for front end for almost a year now, and I love learning foreign languages such as French, German, Arabic, and Japanese. I usually use Duolingo to learn the languages. This is the outline of my presentation. I will share about why and what is unit testing, the main principles of unit testing, the life cycle, how to install unit testing, some demonstration, and the key takeaways and conclusion. Why unit testing? Have you ever wondered how to prove whether or not your application is working properly? So, first thing first, you can do unit testing. Because if you don't have any unit testing, how can you prove that it is working properly? Like in this picture, the stakeholder asks whether or not the application works, and then he says it's magic. But if you do your unit testing, it can be a good point that can show that your application works according to the requirements. So, why unit testing? It is an early bug detection. You will know that there is some bugs and you can just fix it directly afterwards. And then it is also the earliest testing effort. It provides insights for better quality of your code as well. What is unit testing actually? It is a level of software testing that validates your software performance, and it is also the smallest testable part because it tests the smallest testable part of your code, and that is why it is called unit testing. The principles of unit test, it is an abbreviation of FIRST. The first one is fast, from F, should be fast enough. So our unit testing should be fast enough. It should be much faster than our manual testing. The second one is isolated. We want to ensure that our unit test doesn't affect another unit test. It doesn't affect our main code either. It should be repeatable. Anytime you run your unit test, it should show the same results. It should be self-validating. It can determine whether or not it is fail or pass without any manual verification. And it has to be timely. It is usually written right after the code creation or before we do the main code. For example, like test-driven development. The common life cycle on unit test. The first one, we have the setup. So this is the unit test that we do before anything happens. One of the famous library to use for unit testing is called Jest. So I give the example on Jest, and on the demonstration I also use Jest. So there are some examples on the setup part which are before all and before each. Even the key words here explain that it is happening before something or when something happens on our code. So the second one is the test execution. When we execute the code, then this test is the one that testing the performance. So the examples are test, it, and describe. I will also show some example of it and describe in the demonstration. So this test can be used during the execution. And then the last one is the tear down. This test is done after the test execution. The examples are after each or after all. So for example, if we do mockup, there are certain data that we use. We can use the tear down part to clean the data so that it does not affect our code or other unit test. So this is how we can install unit testing. For example, by not using Vue CLI, we can run the npm or the yarn. So there are two different packages when we use JavaScript package manager, which are npm and yarn. And even though my title is about unit testing on Nuxt.js, Nuxt.js is a platform, it's a software, it's a framework that is built on Vue.js. That's why the unit test is done on Vue component. So we run the installation to get the unit test for Vue component. And then this command will add some dependencies on our project, which are Jest, Babel.js, Vue.js, and etc. Okay, so here is the demonstration. I would like to show when we mount Vue component, how we can test that. Here I have my component that has hello with variable name in it, and then I export default the data for name as there. So I have hello there on my my web application. And then I want to do the test on mounting this Vue component. I use this code, which is by importing shallow mount from our dependency for the testing, which is Vue test utils. And then I use shallow mount to test my hello world component. So this is how I import the hello world from that part, and then I use describe here, the test that I used during the test execution, and I have it inside. So I describe the hello world and it renders name when mounting. So I have a constant here, which is assert name as there, and I have a constant wrapper that use shallow mount to get the value of name from my hello world. And then I expect that wrapper has the value of name same as assert name. So it should be matching or to match assert name. So the name inside hello world should be matched with assert name as shown here. So I use shallow mount. Let's see what happened when I run this test case. Alright, so the test result on mounting Vue component, I just run yarn test or npm test, and here I run the hello world.test.js, and it tests the hello world.vue, the describe, and the it renders name when mounting. It is a green check, and this shows the time taken during the test. It only takes 21 milliseconds, which is really fast. And then this is the result. It has one test suite and one test in it, and it all passed. Okay, now let's try when I want to unit test the method that I created. So before I have props name, and then I want to change the name by using the method that is called change name, and I have an argument or input new name. When I call this function or method, I want it to change the name or this dot name to new name, to the input that the function use. And then the change name method is to change the value of name. So I test the method. First, I used similar one like before. So this one is inside the describe like before. So it's just below the first it should be successfully called change message method. So I first check the name to be there when it was mounted, and then I call change name method. After the change name method is called, I want the name inside the hello world to be the name after change expected. So the first one I use there, I have there, and then I change it to beautiful. Supposedly the result will be beautiful. The name will be beautiful after I call the change name. So let's try to run this code. So this is the brief explanation. The first one, I mount the component, and then I check the value of name when it was mounted, and then I call change name here, and then I ensure that the change of name is correct. So from there it becomes beautiful. And then the test result on method, so I run the same test file, which is the hello world .view that I was testing, and then the first one renders name when mounting. This is the first test that I used, and then the second one, the successfully called change message method. This one also have a check. So the two test cases has passed here, and then this is the result. I still have one test suite but with two tests in it, so everything passed. Okay, so I have total number of tests 2, and then the first one is to test the mounting part, and then the second one to test the method. If you see that the time taken when mounting, it was 15 milliseconds, because it is the time that we open the page or we mount the component. But once it's there, when it calls the change message method, it only takes 4 milliseconds. Alright, so next is the example when a failure test happened. So I used the same test case, but here I accidentally used the name expected in the expect. So the first one I call change name method using the name after change expected, right? But I expect it to be the name expected, which is the previous one. So it is wrong, or it is not correct. That's why it is written here. It is expected to have there inside here, but it received beautiful. So supposedly after I change the name, it should be beautiful, but I check it to be the same as the previous one. That's why it's a fail. Okay, so I just changed this name expected to be the name after change expected. Okay, so that is a little example about unit testing on Nuxt Vue.js. You can learn more about this on Vue.js org v2 unit testing Vue components. And let's conclude this presentation. And these are the key takeaways and the conclusion. The first one, we learn and understand the importance of unit tests, and then we know why we do unit tests, when we should do unit tests, and what is unit test actually. Okay, so why? Because it is to validate our software performance. It is to show whether or not it's working correctly. It detects early bugs and stuff. And when we do unit tests, it should be after we write our main code. And what is unit test? It is the smallest testable part that we can do. And the unit testing, actually, it can be daunting, but it is highly rewarding. Why? Because we already did our main code. Why do we need to have another thing to do, which is the unit testing? Well, at first it might take some time, but in the long run it will be really beneficial because we can run it anytime with the same results. So we can really rely on unit testing as well. Okay, and then of course, because unit testing is fast, simple, repeatable, and reliable. So that's what we learned from this presentation. Okay, so this is a little quote from Martin Fowler. I find that writing unit tests actually increases my programming speed. If you don't believe it right now, it's okay, but you can try it later and see the results. Okay, so thank you very much.